Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that by the time you take in what I'm going to say, the story I'm going to tell, you will like, subscribe, and share. Help to get us to 10,000 subscribers. What you get here, you'll find it nowhere else. I will say more about this when I come to the end of this presentation. He decided to start an Igbo farm right in the middle of Europe, the middle of Western Europe to be exact. This is the story, or one of the stories of one of the few Jews. He's actually of Ashkenazi Jewish origins, who made up their minds to study the history and the culture of the people who address themselves as Oke Ibiri, Ibiriache, and Ibirinta. Those who know may know that the when we say Hebrew, we are actually using English language, but when we want to use the language that has been called Hebrew, the word Hebrew becomes Ibiri. He sent an email to me 2 nights ago, and I received it in the morning of yesterday. And when I began to go through, my hair stood up. After this gentleman had obtained his PhD and had published a book that forced Igbos who were serious, who were skeptical that the Igbo people came from Israel, because this was not taught in any school, this was not taught in any church, this was not taught anywhere the Igbo people will get valid information. And the state of Israel, its officials did not study it. Accordingly, they did not know anything about it. But the book that this gentleman published changed the views of the people I'm talking about. After publishing this book, he went back to Europe, where he came from, and decided to become a farmer and a Torah teacher. He said he drew the inspiration after his visit to Igbo land. I toured Igbo land with him more than 18 years ago. You can forget about my looks. I've done a lot of things. So I took him on a visit to Igbo land. He said that while we toured, he saw remnants and vestiges of how the Igbo people farm. He said that when he went back to Europe, he decided to set up a farm like that. So if you go to the middle of Europe today, to his country, to his city, and to his farm, you will be looking at a facsimile of the farms that my grandmother operated. When I read this, I shook my head. By 1900, 1900, the Igbo people were not just self-sufficient in food production, but according to people who hated them with passion, the colonial officials of Britain, who had no reason to say anything good about the Igbos. After all, they said the Igbos were pagans. They said the Igbos were heathens. They said all sorts of things about the Igbos. But they could not hide that the Igbos were 100% self-sufficient in food production. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, most nations in the world, then including European nations, we are not self-sufficient in food production. We don't even want to get into Nigeria. Maybe up to one quarter of the population of the people that we are Nigerians, then we are beggars. So self-sufficiency in food production was not the norm across board, but it was what the Europeans wrote about the Igbos. And the Europeans had no reason the British had no reason to praise their enemies. They also wrote that these uncivilized pagans, that is the Igbos, that among them there were no prostitutes, no beggars, no destitute, no homeless people. Interestingly, even today, the almost destroyed people, if you look carefully at their culture, you would see that these writers were writing what they saw. How can there be homeless people among the Igbos when everybody was given a portion of land? When Omenana, the religion and culture of, by the way, the Israelites, which was the religion and culture of the Igbos, had given everybody a piece of land. If you have a piece of land, how can you be homeless? If you have a piece of land, how would you not produce enough food to eat? But what surprised me most about this farm that was set up in the middle of Europe was that it was started by an Ashkenazi Jew and not an Igbo. And why was he inspired to set up an Igbo farm? The story I will tell you will rock you. In the year 2002, when Abu, that angel that the Lord sent to protect me, when that angel stared me and I began this research, God directed me to an Ashkenazi woman, an Ashkenazi Jewish woman who was working. I believe she was in America then. And she introduced me to one of the Ashkenazi Jews that I not only regard as a father, but as one of the greatest people of the last century. He lives in Israel now. When he heard that I was documenting the history and the culture of the Igbo people, he said, "My friend, I want to introduce you to two better Israel scholars. The better Israel are Ethiopian Jews." I understand why he thought that introducing me to the better Israel scholars will be very helpful as I continue to look at Igbo culture. He believed that since they were Africans, their traditions, if their traditions were Israelite and the traditions of the Igbos were Israelite, they will resemble. So he introduced these two fine gentlemen to me. And among the things they told me was document the burial traditions of the Igbo people, document the farming traditions of the Igbo people. I took off from my base in Abuja, stopped between the borders of the Gala people and Abuja, or rather between the borders of Abuja and Kogi. But I heard that the Igala people were inhabitants of Lokoja anyway. I began to look at the farming techniques from there. When I got to the end of Kogi and I was about to enter Igbo land, everything changed. What I saw in Kogi was different from what I saw in Igbo land. I traveled throughout Igbo land writing about the agricultural and food storage practices because these two scholars told me, document for us the food storage and farming techniques of the Igbos. If they resemble the traditions, the farming traditions of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the facts will lay themselves bare. I documented etu ndị Igbo si akọ nri na etu ndị Igbo si edewe ji n'ọba. I documented how the Igbos plant yam, how they plant cocoyam, how they plant cassava, and how they store yam in barns. I also took photographs and sent to them. I laugh like the masquerade. 3 days later, they sent their evaluation. They said the farming traditions of the Igbos indicate that the culture and the religion of the Igbo people developed in a land where water was scarce. So, the agricultural practices prove that they were Israelites because nobody who calls himself Igbo today or non-Igbo would think that water has ever been scarce in what is called Igbo land. Water is not scarce. Almost every community has a river, and the rains fall for up to 8 months in a year. But these gentlemen, one of them was an economist with the World Bank. The other one is an archaeologist. He is still teaching in a university in America. He said that the food storage practices and the farming techniques indicate, he did not say suggest, he said they indicate that the culture of these people was developed in a region where water was scarce, where there were always droughts. Ladies and gentlemen, let us build up this channel. It is not monetized. I'm not making money from it, but I'm storing up information. I am storing up information that the Iberi people need, that is the Igbo people, the Ashkenazi Jews need, the Sephardi Jews need, the Mizrahi Jews need, the Beta Israel need. That is what is happening here. And this is not being done anywhere else as systematically as it is being done here. Thank you. Have a good day.